What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, June 23rd, 2017. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today, and of course in our third hour, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to basically put you on the air as soon as you call in with your comments and criticisms. And as usual, the tantrum people are hacking my server at the start of my show here. All righty, let's see now. Nancy Pelosi, a lot of people are starting to say she's gone off the deep end. She's developed some very strange speech patterns of constant repetition, cutting off in the middle of sentences, and some of her ideas are really getting on out there. Nancy Pelosi's latest brain flash, if you will, is that letting people keep the money that they have earned represents stealing. That, according to her, and this may be true of all liberal Democrats, if you're allowed to keep the money you earn, you are in effect stealing from poor people who didn't earn it. Which is kind of weird coming from somebody with the accumulated wealth that Nancy Pelosi has. Now, Nancy, of course, still sees herself as a main driving force within the Democratic Party, although a lot of people are saying that she is at least in part responsible for the Democratic Party's downturn in fortunes last year, including Hillary Clinton's loss. Now, Cher, the singer, is actually telling Nancy Pelosi that she and the Democrats have messed up so bad, it is time for her to go. And there apparently is this split in the Democratic Party between the old guard, the Pelosis who want to run on identity politics, and the younger progressives who are continuing to center around Bernie Sanders. And apparently there is actually a move within the Democratic Party to try and find a way to basically pry her loose from her position as the House Minority Leader. And according to this article that's over in CNN, there's a group of Democrats who have already held a closed-door meeting looking for a way to somehow get her out of the position and start letting her fade into history here. Now, as you know, the other day, Donald Trump came on out with a very good point. If Russia was interfering with last year's election, why didn't Obama try and stop them? And it's a really good question. And so over at the Washington Compost, they've come out with this story, and it's pure bovine excrement, in which they're out there saying that last August, President Obama was informed by the CIA that they had all kinds of evidence of Russian attempts to hack the election. Now remember, Jay Johnson is already, nobody's actually found anywhere where Russia actually changed any of the outcomes. But they're out there now, and so according to the Compost, what they're saying is that Obama did in fact try and stop the Russians, but it was all done in secret. And the reason we know that's nonsense is because as soon as Hillary lost, they've been screaming Russia, Russia, Russia ever since. If they actually had evidence Russia was interfering with the election last August, why not make it public back then? So that's the latest one from the Washington Compost. And again, if you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. So let's take a look at all the media coverage claiming that Russia was trying to interfere with our government, interfere with the elections, hack the DNC, and not just here in the United States. Over in Germany, Germany's intelligence agency accused Russia of deploying cyber attacks to destabilize their government. They claimed Russia hacked secret German communications and gave them to WikiLeaks. German officials later concluded the communications were likely a leak from an insider within the Bundestag itself. Now, over in France, the Washington Compost, the New York Slimes, Reuters, Politico, Register, and a bunch of other corporate publications claimed that the Russians hacked the French election just like they hacked the U.S. election. The head of the NSA claimed that the NSA actually watched the Russians hack the French elections. the French government says they have found no evidence of Russian hacking. So they're batting zero right now. Over in Qatar, CNN reported U.S. officials suspected that Russia had hacked Qatar's state news agency, triggering this rift with Saudi Arabia. The Qatari government saying, no, it wasn't Russia. They know who it was, and it was one of their neighboring countries. Now, back here in the United States, the Washington Compost published a story claiming that Russian hackers penetrated the U.S. power grid through a utility in Vermont. The Compost subsequently was forced to concede that the incident had no links to the Russian government, and the computer involved was a laptop that wasn't connected to the electrical grid, and there may not have even been any malware on the laptop. They made the story out of thin air. Now, when that treasure trove of secret NSA tools were revealed, Russian hackers were blamed. Turned out to be a leak by an NSA insider. And, of course, the evidence that the Russians hacked Democratic Party emails and leaked them to WikiLeaks, it's just not there. And again, more attention is being called to the fact that the only evidence presented for Russia hacking the DNC servers came from this company called CrowdStrike that worked for the DNC. And last March, they withdrew their statements, and they're refusing to testify before Congress. So there's nothing there. And more people are starting to ask this very important question. Why were America's law enforcement agencies skilled in cybercrime not allowed to look at the servers? Department of Homeland Security didn't. FBI didn't. CIA didn't. Nobody got to look at the servers. We were just supposed to take the word of CrowdStrike, who has now withdrawn it, and Hillary Clinton, who wouldn't know the truth if it hit her in the face. All right, we're going to do a quick little shout-out to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network. Tucker Carlson is out there basically denouncing that CNN is no longer a news channel. And they may call themselves a news network. It's not true. And Tucker Carlson's specific point was earlier in the week when CNN refused to cover one of Trump's rallies. The media is tremendously biased toward liberals. Now, interestingly enough, shortly after President Trump said that he did not record any of his conversations with James Comey, James Comey was spotted entering the offices of the New York Slimes in Slime Square, New York City. And, of course, you remember back during his testimony before the Senate, he confessed under oath he was the source of a leak to the New York Slimes about this meeting he supposedly had with the president before he was fired in June. And again, all of these top officials serve at the pleasure of the president, and the president has a right to fire them at any time for any reason or no reason at all. I don't like that necktie. You're gone. Bill Clinton fired his head of the FBI just one day before Vincent Foster was suicided. Threw the upper levels of the FBI into turmoil. The new FBI director was literally being sworn in at the White House the very day that Foster was killed. Now, a little bit of good news coming out of that shooting in Alexandria, Virginia. The two patients who were in intensive care are now out of intensive care. They are recovering. They're obviously going to have some interesting scars to show in their private moments, but they're both out of intensive care, and that, of course, includes Scalise. Apparently, an official of the Democratic Party got caught on tape saying that he was glad Scalise got shot, and I wish he was blanking dead. No empathy at all. No empathy at all. Well, of course, Congress is quick to react, and Republican lawmakers out there saying they want to make it legal to carry a gun in Washington, D.C. Now, Washington, D.C. has very, very strict gun laws. They used to be stricter. The Supreme Court kind of loosened them up a little bit. The caveat here is, of course, that the bill that they're proposing to make it legal to carry a gun in Washington, D.C. is only for members of Congress. You serfs, you slaves, you don't need guns. Okay. And I'm getting sick and tired of all these liberals who are still out there making jokes about Trump dying, and apparently the latest happened over at the Glastonbury Festival in Great Britain. Johnny Depp got up on the stage and joked, when was the last time an actor assassinated a president, which is obviously a reference to John Wilkes Booth. But he was out there pushing his film, The Libertine, and the audience apparently cheered, and Depp has since apologized, agreeing it was a tasteless comment to make. But look at this huge line of celebrities who have done things like this, like Kathy Griffin. They all think this is all jolly stuff. And again, I'm very disappointed in Donald Trump, especially on the issues of foreign interventions. But it's not appropriate to talk about harming him or killing him. We talk about the issue. The wars are bad for the United States. They're certainly not very good for the countries we're trying to invade or the people who live in them. But that's how you're supposed to treat this in an adult-like manner. Not run around making these tasteless jokes. And the summer of rage is still going on because over at a free speech rally in Santa Monica, California, Trump supporter Tony Foreman was stabbed 9 times. And they're saying, obviously, it was politically motivated, was a hate crime, and he was targeted for his pro-Trump view. And he's in intensive care. So, now, over on Broadway, I guess they're getting tired of Hamilton and some of these other plays. There is a new stage adaptation of George Orwell's 1984. And for the opening night, they have a special guest, George Orwell's son, Richard. And Richard was just a kid in 1949 when George Orwell finished the book. Basically he's out there saying it's kind of scary how prescient the book is, and it's still as fresh today as it was back then, and he's absolutely right. Orwell wrote it as a warning for future generations. Unfortunately, too many politicians thought it was a blueprint. All right, so let's talk about the war zones here. The army is regaining more ground near Palmyra. The Syrian government, pro-government forces are making great gains. And again, looking at the situation maps from March versus today, they've made a huge amount of progress. They have advanced further against ISIS and the U.S.-backed militants in the province of Homs. And there's the line between ISIS and the U.S.-backed militants is getting really, really blurred. I'll elucidate on that a little bit later in the show here. And apparently they captured Tal Ghurab, northwest of the U.S. garrison of Zakuf near the Syrian-Iraqi border. And with the liberation of Tal Ghurab, the SAA and its allies increased pressure on U.S.-backed militants operating in the area and strengthened the Syrian military position at the border with Iraq. So now they're up there against that border with Iraq, absolutely solid. And that leaves all those U.S. forces that were trying to get to Al-Tanf kind of abandoned in the desert. And I think the prudent and wise thing to do would be to start airlifting them out right now. Meanwhile, 2 Russian Navy frigates and a submarine fired 6-caliber cruise missiles on Islamic State targets in Syria. And they all hit their targets. They apparently run much better than the American cruise missiles. And those who survived the attack were then hit with airstrikes. So, very, very solid situation here. Now, Senator Tim Kaine, Hillary's, running mate, is now saying, yes, the U.S. strikes on pro-Assad targets in Syria are completely illegal. And Congress, members of Congress are saying it's time to take back Congress war authority. Now, the Constitution says only Congress can declare war, and Congress got around that back during the Bush administration. with sort of a pre-authorization of the use of force, so that the president could just play Napoleon anywhere on the planet he wanted to. And now members of Congress are saying it's gotten completely out of hand, and it's time to go back to playing by the rules. Now, under the War Powers Act, the president can deploy U.S. military forces in the face of an emergency for a limited period of time until Congress can get together and come to a decision whether or not the nation wants to go to war. And in this day and age of instantaneous electronic communication, that time interval ought to be a little bit smaller. But the idea of having a president just able to unilaterally send our kids off to war, that was never the way the country was supposed to work. Now, over in Raqqa, refugees interviewed by Russia Today are saying that it almost seems like the U.S. coalition planes are just dropping bombs at random, and they're killing more civilians than they are ISIS, and they're complaining about the indiscriminate use of white phosphorus, which is banned for use over residential areas. It's an incendiary. It can cause horrific burns if it gets on you. The only legal use for white phosphorus under international law is to create clouds of smoke as a camouflage. But airdropping it onto residential units, which the U.S. coalition has been doing in Syria and Israel has been doing in Gaza, is banned under international law. It's a war crime. Now, here's a little bit of an embarrassment, a little bit of a whoopsie here. Apparently, one of the White Helmets volunteers was actually caught on video working with the U.S.-backed rebels dumping beheaded bodies into mass graves. And these were Syrian army troops who apparently, if they are captured alive, they're subjected to a tremendous amount of abuse. Now, the volunteer has been fired by the White Helmets, but it's out there. They're playing both sides. They're not who they claim to be here. Meanwhile, the Kurds are reaching kind of a critical juncture relative to the United States. Donald Trump is apparently caught in the middle of an argument within his own administration. Some of them want to expand the war in Syria by targeting the Iranian-linked elements, and the others are saying if you do that, it's going to mean basically endless conflict across the entire region, which a lot of people think is a bad idea. At least for the reason it will seriously disrupt the supply of oil coming out of there. And this argument is complicating an already complex situation where you have Syria, Iran, Turkey's kind of off doing its own agenda, Russia's in there, the U.S. is in there illegally, and it's going back and forth. Further complicating this is that apparently the U.S. plan was to treat the Kurds the way they treated Libya. Send in all kinds of arms and weapons to get Gaddafi out of power, then collect them all back up and ship them to the next battlefield. But investigative journalist Rick Sterling is out there saying that if the United States thinks that the Kurds are going to give those weapons back once ISIS is defeated, it's a fairy tale. It's wishful thinking. Once the Kurds have those weapons, they're not going to want to give them back. They're surrounded by enemies that they just stole big chunks of country from. Okay. Getting indications that Israel and Washington were the machinations behind the change in Saudi Crown Prince, they're asking, is war with Iran now inevitable with this new Saudi Crown Prince? More about this when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about the recent shakeup in the succession in Saudi Arabia. And to give you a little bit of background, you need to understand that virtually every king of Saudi Arabia all came from the same father, Ibn Saud, and he just punched out a bunch of kids all during his life. It's good to be the king. And the succession hands off from one to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other. Now, the last king before King Solomon was King Abdullah. And he, of course, declared his son to be the crown prince. Well, then Abdullah passed away, and the Saud family got together and decided that Abdullah's son was simply too young to take on the job. And so they handed the throne to the next brother in the line, who's King Solomon. And King Solomon, now that he is the king, has said that his own son will now be the crown prince. And now we're getting this information that Israel and Washington were bringing pressure to bear on this, because now the new crown prince, he owes Washington and Israel. And so people are asking now, is war with Iran now inevitable under the new Saudi crown prince? And it's a pressing question because King Solomon is already 81 and not really sure. He's showing signs of deterioration. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. James in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I wanted to talk about, you had said, I think a month or two ago, that our F-35 that the U.S. Lockheed Martin built kind of just gave it away to Israel or sold it for pennies. What was that? Did they just give it away or sell it?
Well, they technically don't give it. I mean, Israel uses the money the U.S. government gives them to turn around and buy U.S. weapons, and that's how Congress tries to say that this is all a really good thing, because obviously the money is coming back into the United States and providing jobs for the military-industrial complex. Now, there was a scandal. It didn't involve the F-35. It involved older aircraft. It was either the F-15 or the F-16, where the Pentagon decided they had simply built too many of them. And so a bunch of them were simply declared as military surplus and sold to Israel basically at surplus prices. If you're my age, and you'll remember that military surplus, real military surplus, a lot of stores claim to be military surplus, but they aren't. Real military surplus, you can get some really great stuff at really great prices, and that's basically how that came down.
So they build these things with taxpayer money.
Yep.
And then they sell them to other countries, and the profit goes to the company, not to the taxpayer?
No, it goes.
So why isn't the American people
it goes
outraged?
to the Treasury. Well, if it's sold by the Pentagon, it goes into the defense budget. The issue, though, is it's sold at a discount. The other issue is that Israel has a bad habit of reverse engineering weapons they get from the United States, copying them, and then selling their copies to other countries who may not be on good terms with the United States. There's been a huge...
That sounds like a national security issue.
It is a national security issue. There have been several cases where Israel has been entrusted with top-secret military technology by the United States, and then we find out they're selling it to other countries.
How is that safe for our troops, then?
Well, it isn't.
Well, why isn't anybody making more of a big deal about this?
Well, they should be. But, in this country, take the lesson from Stephen Colbert. When Oliver Stone was on his show saying, Israel interferes with our elections a lot more than Russia does, the CBS producers cut it out of the show. Can't let the people see that. And it's a mark of the control, the influence Israel's government has over our nation. We are living under a puppet regime that rules us for a foreign power. And none of these other countries living under puppet regimes like it, and we shouldn't like it either. Okay?
Is that why they say... Oh, okay. Is that why they say our people are wasting money, like in food stamps and everything, and try to distract from that big thing?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because the money that's lost in food stamp fraud is pennies compared to military spending. Got to let you go, James. Got to do a commercial. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, over in Yemen, the leader of the Ansarullah movement, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, has basically slammed all of this Iranophobia saying that the only reason that's being hyped up right now, along with the Russophobia, is to continue to divert attention from what's going on over in Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank. And I think he's absolutely on target with that comment. Now, getting on over to Qatar, the situation is ramping up. As you know, Saudi Arabia issued a new set of guidelines, demands, and we don't know what the whole list is just yet, but shutting down Al Jazeera permanently and cutting off all contact with Iran are high on the list. And apparently the Arab nations are also trying to put pressure on Turkey. In particular, Saudi Arabia is putting pressure on Turkey to close down their new military base in Qatar. And Turkey is saying, no. We just got that thing built. We're using it. We're not leaving it. So, anyway. Over in Pakistan, Islamabad is condemning the U.S. continued use of drone strikes into their country on Pakistani soil against alleged but unproven militants. And they're denouncing these drone strikes as a violation of Pakistan's sovereignty, and they're absolutely right. When the U.S. sends a drone into somebody else's country without that government's permission, it is a violation of their sovereignty. And they're not very careful about picking out their targets. They use profiling. Gee, that person looks like they might be a terrorist. All right, kill him. His necktie clashes with his trousers. Kill him. He's too tall. Kill him. Now, as you know, there's been a recent kerfuffle over the fact that a Russian aircraft intercepted a U.S. spy plane that was flying too close to the Baltic Fleet, and the U.S. tried to make a stink of it because it was international airspace. But anybody who's running a fleet, they maintain basically a defensive zone around them. And anybody who's flying in international space understands you don't violate that. Bad things can happen. But as it turns out, apparently, in the past week alone, Russian jets have been forced to intercept 14 foreign spy planes flying along their national borders. Now, that doesn't sound like a training exercise. That sounds like probing, testing defenses, getting ready for an attack here. There is a very ugly story that's coming on out, and Claire and I are going to go into it in more depth during hour number 3, but I'm going to mention it here. This goes back to the fact that the U.S. has been exposed as a nation that employs torture at places like Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo. And apparently there's a new report that the U.S. has been complicit in the use of torture at secret prisons in Yemen, where prisoners in Yemen have been tortured by the United Arab Emirates personnel and then handed over to U.S. forces for interrogation. Now, the U.S. forces, at least in this report, this came from Associated Press, the U.S. forces were not directly involved in the torture, but obviously they're aware of it. And they're aware that it's a war crime. Now, a little bit of good news coming on out here. The High Court in London ruled yesterday that the Conservative government acted unlawfully in trying to prevent local councils in the United Kingdom from divesting from firms involved in Israel's military occupation. In other words, Parliament tried to basically ban BDS, at least as far as the local councils, and the High Court in London said, no, that's illegal. You're not allowed to do that. Now, there's another little piece of good news. This came out a little while ago, but it's worth mentioning here. The United States Supreme Court has unanimously reaffirmed there is no hate speech exception to the First Amendment. And this goes back to that so-called slants case. And they basically say that the idea that the government may restrict speech expressing ideas that offends strikes at the heart of the First Amendment. Speech that demeans on the basis of race, ethnicity, gender, religion, age, disability, or any other similar ground is hateful. But the proudest boast of our free speech jurisprudence is that we protect the freedom to express the thought that we hate. So, there's a victory for the Bill of Rights, something to celebrate this coming July 4th. So basically, what the Supreme Court has said is that these so-called hate speech laws that Israel has lobbied for all across Europe, and they've been lobbying for them here, they're not going to get them. And again, this idea that you can silence somebody or shut them up because somebody somewhere is offended by what they say is ridiculous. You can't have a free society and no offense. It's impossible. You can't have democracy and not offend somebody. You cannot tell the truth without offending those who've got something to hide. And we have way too many people, especially over on the liberal Democrat side, whose entire sense of self-worth is always finding something to be offended about. So, let's talk about the economic news here. Apparently, at the very top of the Federal Reserve's worries is the credit card debt. And, of course, we have been advising our listeners and readers for a long time, get that credit card debt down. Especially on variable rate cards. When the Fed raises the prime rate, those interest payments on those cards go up, and they're already sky high. They're bordering on usury, bordering on legal loan sharkery, as it were. And apparently there's a lot of default out there going on about credit cards, and they're looking at the projected losses from default on credit card bills at the top 34 banks as a potential serious problem. Well, it is and it isn't. It is in terms that the numbers look really, really bad, but it isn't when you remember it's all imaginary money, especially that interest. That money that they claim that you owe for the use of their make-believe money is just more make-believe. Banking is not a science, it's a religion. And when you open your eyes and look at it, you'll realize that all this Sturm und Drang and pain and suffering and poverty and hunger is all based on fairy tale money. There's no value to it. It's numbers in a computer. It's ink and paper. And we are brainwashed into thinking it represents something real that we have an obligation to. The fact of the matter is, they could write off all this debt to restart the system. Nobody's going to miss a meal. Nobody's going to have their Wall Street condos repossessed. It's just numbers on balance sheets. It doesn't mean anything. But for those who are still enslaved into that belief system, the news is dire. Getting on back to Illinois, it is looking very, very serious. Illinois could be the first state to have to declare bankruptcy since the Depression of the 1930s, which would signal that we are, in fact, in another depression, regardless of what euphemism they want to choose for it this time. But let's just call it what it is. And a big part of it, Illinois' problems, are the unfunded liabilities. And again, when you try and run an entire economy on loaned money, the debt is always going to grow faster than the available money supply. What's going on in Illinois, what's going on all across America, was the inevitable result of the decision by Congress and Woodrow Wilson 100 years ago to illegally and unconstitutionally transfer the authority for the creation of the monetary system into the hands of a private bank. And I'm sure they were all well rewarded for it. And I'm sure they all went to bed at night satisfied that when the inevitable destruction came, they would be long dead, and it wouldn't be their problem to have to live through. But here we are, and it is happening. Up in Canada, the Sears Canada division has gone bankrupt. They've had to lay off 2,900 people. Their investors are screaming over the losses. Sears down here is still not doing all that well either. And as we head into what at this point seems an inevitable major correction or crash, already we're seeing the Democrats figuring out how they're going to blame this on Donald Trump. And Trump's the new kid on the block. He hasn't been here long enough to significantly impact the economy. It's like Herbert Hoover. The history books blame him for the Depression of the 1930s, but Hoover did not create the Depression. It was created for him by the bankers, by Wall Street. The same applies here. Now, of course, Donald Trump could do an Andrew Jackson, and I understand Donald Trump admires Andrew Jackson. He's got a portrait of him apparently up in the White House. Shut down that private central bank. And Congress has the authority to do it at any time. They can simply vote to revoke the charter. And there's a repayment of a loan to the owners of the Federal Reserve, but at today's inflated dollars, it's really not that much money. And they could do it. But Congress won't. Congress loves those very fat campaign donations they get from all those Wall Street companies and the Federal Reserve. And I think one of the biggest mistakes Woodrow Wilson made, along with signing the Federal Reserve Act, is that they didn't put a provision in there to forbid the Federal Reserve from engaging in any kind of lobbying or political activity. By the way, something a lot of people don't realize, do you know the Federal Reserve does not pay any taxes on all the money they're making? It's right there in the Federal Reserve Charter. The only taxes they pay are the property taxes for the land on which their banks sit. And they're exempt from all other taxes. What a sweet deal that is. What a sweet deal that is. All right. We talked about this before, but we're going to mention it again because we've got a little bit more detail. Before 1973, it was actually illegal in the United States to profit off of health care. Everything connected with health care was run as a service, and they were forbidden from exploiting the fear and pain and suffering of patients to loot and plunder them. But in 1973, Richard Nixon signed into law the Health Maintenance Organization Act of 1973, which allowed medical insurance agencies, hospitals, clinics, and doctors to begin functioning as for-profit business entities. And now you know who to blame for the sky-high cost of medical care in this country. And Nixon signed this as a friend to his friend and campaign financier, Edgar Kaiser, who was then the president and chairman of Kaiser Permanente. And guess which insurance company got the first taste of federal subsidies to implement the Health Maintenance Act of 73? It was Kaiser Permanente. By the way, a little bit of history about Kaiser Permanente. People are wondering just where did it actually come from. It actually came out of Kaiser Aluminum, which was a company that went into business when aluminum was first developed as a commercial product. It was Kaiser Aluminum, and they actually did a lot of good stuff, a lot of good product. They even actually funded deep-sea research submersibles, very advanced for their day, all built out of aluminum, of course, because that was where the advertising tie-in came from. And Kaiser Aluminum was so large, they set up a health program for their own employees, Kaiser Permanente. And Kaiser Aluminum eventually went out of business, and Kaiser Permanente spun off as a standalone company, and that's where it comes from here. So getting on down to Great Britain, there's still a lot of brouhaha going on over whether Brexit is actually going to happen or not. And apparently Vince Cable is in secret talks with conservative Remainers to try and frustrate the Brexit. And Vince is admitting he's having these secret talks with Europhile MPs in the Conservative Party, and they are going to try and scupper Brexit. They still want to kill it. Now, London Mayor Sadiq Khan is putting pressure on Prime Minister May to abandon the hard Brexit approach. They're terrified by a hard Brexit. It could be over and done with before they have a chance to intervene, and that's what they want to do. They want the soft Brexit that's going to run for 2 years, which will give them time to find some way to undermine that. Over in the European Union, their chief is out there saying Britain should have a second referendum. Tusk is out there saying British voters can still stop Brexit. They didn't before. Remember, before the original Brexit vote, which was just about a year ago, all the polls were saying Brexit was going to fail. All the media was saying Brexit was going to fail. Brexit passed. And it'll pass a second time. What are they going to do? Come on back and double up on the election fraud? We'll keep holding these elections until we get the results we want. Who cares what you slaves want? You don't count in this world. Only rich people matter out here. People with titles of nobility. George Soros, of course, is out there flapping his mouth saying there will be a new marriage between Great Britain and Europe before the Brexit divorce goes through. He's still out there championing that one world government. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Europe is definitely starting to strain against the EU, and the cracks are showing, and people are starting to shout for freedom and independence. They're tired of all this layer upon layer upon layer of government riding on their backs. Local, county, state, national, supranational, eventually global. It's just too much. Over in Spain, they're hitting a crisis point. Catalan has put in a request to the Spanish government to hold an independence referendum, and the Spanish government said no, even though Spain is a member of the United Nations and constrained by the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights that says any people have a right to hold a referendum to secede. And so Catalan has said, well, we're going to go ahead and have the referendum anyway. We were trying to be nice and polite about this, but we're going to have the referendum anyway. And when they have the referendum, if they get a majority of yes votes, the region's government, Catalan's government, said it will immediately start proceedings to separate from Spain. That might actually trigger another Spanish war. Now, the Ukrainian ex-president Leonid Kuchma has basically lashed out against the European Union, saying that the EU actually triggered the Ukrainian crisis because in their relations between Ukraine and the EU economically brought Ukraine to its knees and then tried to come on in and say, well, you should just join with us. And that was a real major reason why Ukraine said, no thank you, Russia's offering us a better deal, we're going to go and be friends with Russia, which is what triggered the coup d'etat in Kiev and the installation of puppet ruler Poroshenko. So you can see where that's going. Now, I applaud the Supreme Court's decisions regarding the First Amendment. I'm not so sure I agree with this one. And apparently the Supreme Court, in another unanimous decision, officially limited the federal government's ability to strip citizenship from immigrants who were caught lying on their naturalization forms. And their reasoning was the false statements are not relevant to an immigration official's decision to grant citizenship. I think that's absurd on the face of it. And the Supreme Court is saying a jury has to decide if the false statements change the decision. And that's going to make it much more difficult to deport immigrants who have lied on their naturalization papers. And basically, it's sending out a message. Go ahead and lie on the forms. Nothing bad will happen to you. Story coming out of naturalnews.com. Oh, we got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And as I mentioned before we did the break, very troubling story coming out of Investment Watch blog, where apparently the federal government is showing hiring preference to foreign students over American students. And apparently some 350,000 foreign students have been given jobs by the federal government, while the American students are basically struggling with that student loan debt. It doesn't sound like a very fair policy to me, or a very well thought out policy. Okay, now, we have been talking about the History Channel series, 4-part, America's War on Drugs. And I haven't checked the listings to see if it's going to repeat on History Channel, but it is available at History Channel's webpage for the show, the 4 episodes. Now, the first 2 you can just watch. To see the second and the third one, you have to identify your local PBS provider, and if you don't have cable TV, or if you've got basic cable, which doesn't include PBS, apparently there's some difficulty, which is keeping people from looking at the last 2. But there is a page over at YouTube, which has all 4 episodes available as a pay-per-view for about $2 each. And you also need to be very careful. Somebody has been putting up the full episodes of America's War on Drugs on YouTube. And it's a trailer. It's advertised as full episode. It's a little trailer, and then inside that page, you click a link to go see the full episode on another server. The problem is you're opening yourself up to a malware attack if you do that. And let's be fair. History Channel did a really good job on this show. Watch it the legitimate ways. On cable TV, on the pay-per-view, on History Channel's website. But you should watch it. You really should watch it. And a lot of people have been digging out all these other documentaries that have been going on over the years about the same topic. But America's War on Drugs is getting a huge amount of press. It's getting a huge amount of attention. And it should. Every single American needs to look at this show and just wake up and face up to the true nature of the government that is running this country. And then all of a sudden, a lot of what's been going on is going to start making a lot of sense. And apparently the CIA has not really learned anything from its past embarrassments. Apparently, a CIA agent was charged this week for running a massive drug smuggling operation out of North Carolina. Now, there is no indication that this is in any way sanctioned, but obviously this CIA agent had access to information that allowed him to do what he was doing, and apparently he was running a marijuana smuggling operation that not only included trips down to Mexico, but apparently he had this airplane and was flying out to states where marijuana is now legal. And if you buy marijuana in those states, it's clearly marked not for transport outside the state, not for redistribution. And he was loading up the plane with that and flying it back to North Carolina, and he was arrested along with the 2 other people, Brian Rye and Carl Rye of Columbia, South Carolina. Here's where it gets really kind of sad. This CIA agent, James Dennis Smith, is a decorated U.S. Navy SEAL. Apparently he won the Bronze Star in Iraq and a Special Operations Medic of the Year award. So it's sad to see. It's really sad to see. Now let's get on over to Britain, back to Britain here in the Grenfell Tower. Police are now considering manslaughter charges for this fire because apparently the cladding that was used was illegal to use on tall buildings, and it did fail safety tests. It had failed fire safety tests, and so now they're looking at manslaughter charges against this private company that had renovated the building, which may explain why the boss of the company just resigned, maybe heading to someplace without extradition even as we speak here. And it seems the damage is even worse than anybody thought, because apparently, even though the building was renovated, it still had the original asbestos insulation inside from when it was built. And when it was built, it was legal to use asbestos as insulation. The same thing with the World Trade Towers. They were loaded with asbestos. And apparently during the fire, asbestos basically blew all over the neighborhood. And now all those people are having to deal with a cleanup and the risk of mesothelioma or various other respiratory diseases. So, just absurd. And it was all done just to save a few bucks. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Mexico is now officially the second most violent country in the world. I'm not exactly sure which is the first. But apparently there's a survey down there showing that the country had 2,186 murders in 31 days. In May. The month of May, they had 2,186 murders. Here is where it gets interesting. Mexico has very strict gun control, and it's often cited as a model for the United States. Now, the Mexican Constitution grants a right to arms, but the right is deemed valid only in your own home. You're allowed to have a firearm in your own home. You're not allowed to carry it outside. Even then, the police largely ignore that, and they will confiscate firearms from the home. So you can see why the gun grabbers here in the U.S. think it's a wonderful, wonderful idea. And maybe that's why those Mexican drug cartels came up to the United States to get guns from the Fast and Furious program. And that whole Fast and Furious program was just absurd. And again, back to America's war on drugs. You have a government that is out there publicly saying we oppose the use of drugs, just say no, drugs are bad for you, and then you find out that same government is actually the biggest drug smuggler in the country. Well, we have a similar situation here where you have a government that is out there saying you have no need for guns, especially military-style assault rifles. At the same time, that exact same government was giving that kind of weapon to the Mexican drug cartels at taxpayer expense. So maybe we need a new rule. Whatever the government says they're opposed to, they're actually up to their neck doing it. Simple rule of thumb, I would think. Now, a caller mentioned this yesterday on the show, but we're going to get into it here. Apparently there was, in fact, a mass arrest out in Hollywood. 238 people arrested in this pedophile ring bust. And when I was in Hollywood, I knew this sort of thing was going on. I didn't know the scale. But the arrests included major Hollywood players, politicians, white-collar professionals, a monk, and other high-ranking clergy members. And they're hinting that some of the arrested Hollywood people are household names, but they're not going to release them, at least not yet. And I'm certain that the studio lawyers are already out there saying, oh, they've got to have a right to privacy, this will destroy their career, excessive hardship, and so forth and so on. Well, I'm sorry. If you were actually engaged in this stuff, I certainly think your neighbors have a right to know. Especially those neighbors who have small children. And apparently some of the children who were being victimized by these people ran as young as 6 years old. I absolutely cannot fathom what is going on here. and I'm not really all that interested in learning. And I'm a very easygoing guy on a lot of things, and I was a wild child in my youth, you know. But when it comes to little kids, some very primal paternal instincts kick in, very protective, and I'm not ashamed to say it. And I'm sure somewhere out there, there's somebody who thinks, what is that? The Man Boy Love Association, whatever that group is saying, oh, you're just being closed-minded and antiquated. Okay, I'll be closed-minded and antiquated. This is just my opinion. You know, small children are for helping them to grow up, teaching them music, dance, especially science, and so forth and so on. You don't do this kind of thing to them. You don't steal away their childhood, their innocence. And like I said, when I worked in Hollywood, I knew some of this stuff was going on, but not on this scale. I hope they release the names. I think they should release the names. I think if you engage in this kind of behavior, that your career should be ruined. Of course, their studios aren't thinking about the careers of these people who got arrested. They're thinking about the royalties on the TV shows and movies that they've made. And let's see, what was it? I can't remember the actor's name. He played the father in Mom and Dad Save the Earth, and then he was also in Amadeus, and he got caught up in one of these scandals, and that was kind of the end of his career. I'll tell you the one thing I didn't agree with. Let's see, Quigley Down Under, the guy who starred in that. Claire, who starred in Quigley Down Under? Tom Selleck? Tom Selleck, yeah. When there was a gay pride group who found out Tom Selleck is gay. And Tom Selleck, to the best of my knowledge, you know, he keeps his life private and he doesn't go out grabbing kitties or anything like that. And they outed him because they said, we have to have a gay hero. And, of course, it caused a lot of harm to Tom Selleck's career. He's still around, but I didn't agree with that. I actually went out and I bought a couple of copies of Quigley Down Under. I really like that movie, mostly because I'm a black powder shooting enthusiast. All right, I've wandered around enough here. Let's grab a phone call. Tony in Puerto Rico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Aloha. Listen, I just want to change the subject a little bit and make a quick comment.
Yeah.
You mentioned a few times that if World War III starts, Hawaii is going to be a target.
Yes.
What about us in Puerto Rico? Will Puerto Rico be a target, being the territory?
I would say less so. The reason Hawaii is a target is because it is U.S. power projection in this part of the Pacific, and all of the communications for the Pacific military assets route through Pearl Harbor. And, yes, they can be rerouted to airborne assets like the TACAMO planes and satellites, but it would create a logistics nightmare. Plus, we have the dry docks and other support facilities here, and those not being available would put added stress on the remaining facilities in places like Guam and Japan. So, yeah, we are very concerned that if we get into a shooting war with Russia or China, that we could come under attack. And Russia and China's nuclear bombs, if they explode one over Pearl Harbor, Claire and I just won't be here anymore. Now, a more optimistic view of this would be that Russia would like to have those naval assets, the dry docks and the harbor, intact, and so they might take out the communication buildings with cruise missiles and try and simply invade and capture the island. During World War II, following the attack on Pearl Harbor, this island was heavily fortified out of concern that Japan was going to invade and capture it on its way to the American West Coast. Of course, once the war was over and people got to look at the Japanese military records, they discovered that Japan never had an intention of invading Hawaii or even attacking the West Coast. They just wanted command of their part of the Pacific Ocean. So these things happen. But if you go around this island today, you can still find all these pillboxes and all these military tunnels and all this stuff along the coastline where
So Puerto Rico is a little bit safer.
I would say, well, militarily, they're much less important.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks a lot. We're going to let you go here. Okay. Speaking of the military, as it turns out, a federal appeals court has now ruled that crew members of the USS Reagan can sue the Japanese company TEPCO over exposure to the radiation from the Fukushima nuclear disaster because apparently some of the sailors are, in fact, suffering illnesses, and the reason the court said they could go ahead was that TEPCO misrepresented the radiation levels in the surrounding air and water. In other words, they understated them. And we know that happened because I remember right after the whole thing blew up and they came out with this insane amount of radioactivity and everybody said, this is serious. And then 24 hours later they said, oh, we got to take a zero off it. It was a calculator error. Really, it's not all that bad. And everybody was saying, sure, we believe that. And we already knew they were lying because if you remember that iconic photo of the roof blowing off of one of the reactor buildings and there's cloud overhead that's the sickly yellow-green, and TEPCO said it was just a hydrogen gas explosion. Well, when hydrogen burns or explodes, it produces water vapor, which is white. And as it turns out, that sickly yellow-green matches the exact same color of the quadrivalent form of plutonium oxide. So we knew they were fibbing all along on that one. Let's see. Here we go. All right. Getting some puzzling emails. All right, let's talk about computers. Apparently, there's a big growing problem with malvertising. Criminals that will set up companies as fronts that appear to be selling actual products and services, and then they will go to websites and they'll say, we want to advertise, and when you click on the link, they deliver the ransomware. And apparently, the ransomware that attacked the University College of London last week was spread through a malvertising campaign. And it's now been tracked back to a group called AdGolis, and they were using malware-tainted online ads. And these are a type called zero-click required, meaning if you just simply visit the page, you're infected by the malware. You don't actually have to click on that link itself. Everybody knows that the big push now is the Internet of Things, where everything in your house is going to be connected over Wi-Fi and talk to each other and plot your downfall or whatever it is that they're going to be doing over there. But it's turning out now, researchers are saying about half of all these new smart household gadgets, according to which, with a question mark, they're vulnerable to attack by criminals over the Internet, Wi-Fi, or Bluetooth if they can get that close. And they could cause damage. They could simply harass you by turning things on and off remotely. For example, turning on your burglar alarm at 1 o'clock in the morning, night after night after night. I really think this saturation in cyber technology is not only excessive, it's actually making us more vulnerable because these systems are not secure. And part of the reasons these systems are not secure is because the government has mandated they all have back doors for the government's convenience. And then the back doors get on out, the tools get on out, and the cyber criminals are using them. Now, there's a new malware out there that is also based on some of the NSA leaked cyber tools. And this one is very hard to detect. The good news is you may not realize you're infected if you are. And I'll tell you what it does when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take a phone call here. Frank in North Carolina. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, Mike, I missed the last minute or two, so I don't know if you mentioned it, but I contacted a friend of mine who was listening to your show over the internet. I was listening in over my call-in line, on the telephone. And when you were talking about the Hollywood pedophile story, it went dead air on the radio, on my phone. And my friend listening to you on the internet said she thought it was her computer, but yeah, it went dead on there too. So all of that whole story was blocked out. It was blacked out. Oh,
that's kind of weird there. And yeah, I'm hearing from the control room there was some kind of equipment malfunction at that point. And I even got other emails saying that there was a problem. Okay, so let's see if I can
all right.
get back to that. Yeah, here it is. Major Hollywood pedophile bust here. And apparently it really did happen. And 238 people have been arrested in this sweep across Los Angeles. And the arrests included major Hollywood players. They're described as household names. The names are still being withheld. They got politicians, white-collar professionals, a monk, and other high-ranking clergy members. Again, when I worked in Hollywood, I knew this sort of stuff was going on out there somewhere, but I never dreamed it was on a scale like this at all. And it's not just Hollywood. I'm looking at this other story somebody just sent me, where apparently over in Kentucky, a former county district judge is facing 20 felony charges and 2 misdemeanors involving sex trafficking of minors between 2010 and 2017. This guy is 70 years old, and apparently he just decided this was a business he wanted to go into. And it's absurd. And to show you how absurd it is, apparently Bill Cosby is now planning a nationwide tour to teach young boys about the dangers of sexual allegations. And I don't know if it's an attempt to get his career back, or he's actually going to be out there teaching young boys about don't make the mistakes I made when you're out there. But it is really absurd. Are you still there? Okay, apparently not. We're going to switch over to Sherry in Texas. Aloha, Sherry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I have something to say about Crosby, but that's not why I called. So let me just stick to what I was going to say.
Okay.
I've been having your show cut off. Maybe I might hear 50 minutes of it. Thursday, I think I heard 30 minutes of it. And I just started getting really angry. So I called this show. The guy gave the number of the show. This man, whatever the show was, it was I won't mention names, but he sounded like he was broadcasting from his kitchen table. It just had a real bad audio and everything. And I was standing up for you in this show, and I told him about your popularity, your website, and he didn't really know what hit him, I don't think, at first. But he was pirating your time slot, and I asked him, why are you interrupting? And he got indignant like I'm blaming him. I said, no, this is for your listeners.
Oh, okay.
So they can know.
Hang on, we have to back up here a little bit. What do you mean he's pirating my time slot? You're not talking about RBN, or you're talking about Bam User?
No, this was like a little. Usually, it's someone else that interrupts this time slot here in Central Texas. But this was a different one. This was some little. It didn't have any merit to it, and the thing is.
Okay, you missed my question. Where are you hearing my show from? Is it like a local AM broadcaster or Part 15?
Well, it's on a regular digital radio, and it's your broadcasting network. You know, your public what is it called?
RBN.
Yeah, RBN.
Okay.
Yeah, Republic Broadcasting Network. This was a different network, and he became indignant, and I said, no, this is for your listeners. That we should be in the same camp and not knocking each other off the air.
Okay, Sherry, stay on the line. We got to do 4 minutes of commercials, and then we'll come back. I'd kind of like to sort out exactly what's going on. I don't have a clear picture of what's happening. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're talking with Sherry in Texas. And Sherry, I kind of want to back up and take this step by step because, to be very honest, I can't figure out exactly what happened. So just check me on this. You're listening to my show on RBN, live broadcast or replay?
Live broadcast yesterday, right before the guest came on. You came. I'm on 104.9 FM, South Central Texas. 104.9 FM.
Okay.
I'm going to have to find another way to find you. I don't want to live without this show. Anyway.
Okay, well, let me explain
RBN,
something. Let me explain something. When we're carried by on-air affiliates, and thank you for letting me know that we have that one there in Texas, they have the option on whether to carry 1, 2, or all 3 hours of my program or any of the program they're getting from RBN. And a lot of our on-air affiliates don't carry the full 3 hours. That is a huge block of time in a broadcast rotation. And that's why I try and get all the headline news up in the first hour. If you really want to hear all 3 hours, then going to RBN and getting the streaming player would definitely be the way to go. And I hope you didn't give the person at that FM station too much grief, because they could just decide they're going to get rid of my show rather than deal with irate fans.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that got me when you're talking about technology is that I had my, after I hung up, I talked to him about it and all this, and I hung up. I noticed I hit, just to make sure I still had a dial tone, I hit speaker. It was an open line. I could hear everything that was going on in the house. Turned it off. Every so often got on with things. I'd hit that speaker. Again, I was cut off from using my phone. This was my punishment or something.
Well, I don't think it was punishment. I
technology.
think he was just being sloppy, because obviously he's losing a phone line in the process as well. So I wouldn't read.
He went off the air. Yeah.
Okay.
He went off the air when I called the police, and they've heard from me before. I have a good report with the police.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that.
But there's a thing with AT&T that they want they want to get out of this nationwide mandate to run landline phones, and the people that have Frontier, which covers rural areas where I live, and for people with landlines, they kind of support it. And I'm panicking here. Abe Starr, director of the Illinois Public Interest Research Group, said he opposes this because he wants to see more consumer protection. And he wants to see a competition and public safety. And so he's not really happy with this SB 1381 bill, because he says it fails to meet these standards. And I have a little cell phone for when I go to town, and I never turn it on. I might text my son, call me, have news or something. So he'll call me on my landline. I don't have to pay for that because I have local calling. And I can talk to you, and I don't have to pay for it because of my landline, you know?
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we do have other callers waiting on the line here right now. But, AT&T, deploying and then maintaining landlines is very, very expensive. And the business model for a lot of these largest providers now is to assume that everybody's going to have a cell phone and not bother with a landline phone. And in fact, the trend has been downward for people to actually have an installed landline phone. We have one here, and the only time we ever use it is if the cell service goes out. We keep it around for safety reasons. So anyway, I wish you good luck with your political efforts there, and thank you for the information about the broadcaster. But again, when an on-air affiliate carries the show, it's up to them how much of it they want to use. And I hope that you didn't leave this guy too angry.
No, I don't think I did. But thank you for that information. That really helps explain it for me.
Okay. Well,
and so I won't be so frustrated. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for the call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm sorry if you've already covered this earlier. I was just getting home a little while ago. Apparently, I guess a Canadian had made like a record distance kill shot in Iraq when the Canadian forces that are over there weren't supposed to even be in direct contact. Do Do you think that puts a bullseye in place of the maple leaf on the flag for Canada?
Well, then they would look like the Target department stores.
You're absolutely right. We're not even supposed to be in any combat over there.
Oh, come on. All the governments are lying about where our troops are and everything. I mean, look how many times we Americans were told there's no boots on the ground or they're only advisors, and then, of course, we wind up in a full-blown war. Now, knowing what the previous record sniper shot was, I think it's safe to say that the Canadian forces may not actually have been in contact with the opposing forces, because we're probably talking about, a pretty fair distance if he's set a new record.
Apparently, it was 3.5 kilometers.
Yeah, I would say they were not in actual contact at the time, but it was still a reckless thing to do because now the Canadians who are there, they're certainly going to be targeted.
Yeah, there's a bullseye on them. And also at the same time, people should realize that as our technology, gets better and better in manufacturing, obviously these sort of, long-range weapons will get more and more accurate as well.
Well, the latest thing they're working on, are guided bullets that will actually home in on a laser beam. So you'll just put a laser designator on your target and fire the gun in that general direction, and the bullet will actually maneuver itself to hit the target. And my guess is there's probably a thermocouple in the base of the bullet where the heat that is generated by the propellant firing it heats it up enough to where it generates enough electricity to get it to the target, because we're only talking of, a few seconds that it has to operate.
Yeah, that's insane. It just, well, I mean, obviously you're used to this sort of thing because of the country you live in, but
I think I've just been.
We're just being lied to, and it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, and people need to get angry. We wouldn't accept lying by our significant others. We wouldn't accept being lied to by our friends or our coworkers. Why is it we're supposed to just go along with being lied to by the government when, in theory, they're supposed to be working for us anyway? They're our employees. And I think any normal boss who catches an employee lying to him is going to fire that employee on the spot.
Yep, exactly. I feel the exact same way. They are our employees.
Yep.
They work for the private sector. All civil servants are the private sector's employees because they do the work in our stead that we won't or can't because we have other things to do, like, paying taxes. Thanks a lot for your time, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for the thing. We're going to call in Holly in Springfield, Missouri. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. I know that someone else out there must be thinking this, but there's something about the Hollywood story that I don't get. I used to be a public defender, and we had a judge arrested in our jurisdiction. And as far as I know, that was immediately front page news, and there should be paperwork generated, like police reports, etc., with names. And I don't understand, are we now having such a double standard that Hollywood has something like diplomatic immunity?
Yeah, and unfortunately there's nothing new there. And again, I got to see this up close and personal when I was working in the film industry, where the big name bankable stars, they would do some pretty atrocious things, and it would all be hushed up, and the victims bought off. And because the local newspapers and media are closely tied in with Hollywood, they want to be invited to the premieres, they want to hang out with the stars, they'll generally go along with it. Oh, we can't do this to tarnish this movie star's reputation, blah, 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 blah. But there have been cases where big stars have literally gotten away with murder because they were too big a moneymaker for their studios. And it is amazing, but it does in fact happen.
Well, just like everything else going on at the moment, if the public cannot see it, and, apparently it's supposed to touch other people rather than just Hollywood, then I guess it did not happen. So I've been hearing people report on it as though it's a wonderful thing, but if no one ever hears of it, then I guess it didn't happen. Like, did the tree fall in the forest?
Yeah, well, that's the basic idea. Well, see, the thing, the people who are 1 degree of separation from what's going on, they know what happened. The reason for hushing it up in the media is to keep the entire nation from learning about it, because that entire nation represents the people who go to a movie theater and buy a ticket, or who go to the video store and buy the DVD, or who hit the button on a pay-per-view or whatever. That's the revenue stream right there. And the public does have a tendency, when a star has been hit with a really icky scandal, they'll just turn away, and they don't care what the quality of the acting or quality of production is. And that's going to hurt the studio. It's going to hurt everybody involved in the production who's above the line and getting a percentage. They're getting their pay on the back end. They all suffer for that. And you know, it's a ripple effect, and it can hurt everybody, and that's why there is a culture of silence that's going on. But you know, we do know what's going on, and it's kind of weird, because here I am in Hawaii all these years later, and all these things I knew were going on are finally starting to surface on those tabloids. You know, I don't want to go into details or name names, but yeah, that stuff really was going on. And unless somebody goes to court and says the public has a right to know, the public who are parents has a right to know who these people are, I don't think we'll ever hear those household names that got arrested.
Well, number one, it's just terrible, because it probably is the sort of thing that, unless you're a pedophile, the American people would be up in arms about, and it would bring people together. And then one last thing, I know you probably don't want to hear a biblical reference, but it kind of goes down to, you know, God said, don't turn my house into a market, and then Jesus, you know, whipped the money lenders, and it's like America has turned into basically a market, and there's no soul left.
I agree with you on that one.
There's nothing left.
I agree with you on that one. This constant lust for pieces of paper with colored ink has destroyed the very best characteristics of what it used to be an American. And again, I have nothing against being rich. I would love to be rich myself. But there has to be a balance. And the desire for wealth is certainly a nice ambition in life. The desire to excel at what you do, such as music or art, or any of the performing arts, for its own sake, is good as well. Wanting to be the producer of a quality product, just because you want to say, this is a quality product and I made it. There's a balance of these agendas in a healthy society. When the entire society is consumed with the idea of just making a fast buck as quick as they can, it's entirely out of balance, or koyanaskatsi, as the Native Americans would say.
Well, thank you for your time, and I just fear that what used to live in our hearts regarding America, even at the most basic level, the lowest person on the totem pole, which was something aspirational, that it's gone and that we're not going to get it back. That's my fear.
Well, that's a big part of it, and going along with that, of course, is this liberal viewpoint that you don't have to go on out and work to improve yourself, that if you just join a movement and yell and scream, you'll be assigned an elevated position in society, you know, for political correctness' sake. And we're starting to see this unbridled attack on white people about how they should be banned from education and banned from corporate media. And you don't cure racism by racism in reverse. Anyway, Holly, thank you for the call. We're going to let you go, and we're going to pick up a phone call from Tom in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, good afternoon. Michelle's gone. Hey, listen, you want to see a good movie with Tom Selleck, get the movie Folks. Like, here, these are my folks, F-O-L-K-S. You'll laugh your butt off.
Yeah, I saw that one, yes. Okay.
Seen that? Isn't it great?
Yes.
It's hilarious.
I like the guy. When he was playing Magnum P.I., I watched the show, yeah.
Yeah, he's not bad, you know, and, you know, he's good in some Westerns and stuff, but, you know, Their personal life is none of my business. The thing about the virus is a lot of people, if you're still browsing the internet as an administrator, reduce your level of authority on your computer to limited before you go on the internet, and that's the way it should be. That will stop 90% of these viruses. The thing about Google is, if you've noticed, when you do a Google search, you're searching for ABC, whatever, you'll see the first bunch of results come up, and you'll see a little green box that says ad, A-D.
Yes.
A majority of the time, those are viruses. Just like you were talking about, they're paying to get in and get websites. Well, those ads are viruses.
Well, that's good to know. So I mean, I don't use Google much anymore, but that's good information to know.
Yeah, they're good. So, and then the military, I don't know if the gun is out yet, but they've invented a gun that they can use a laser finder and find out how far the enemy is who's hiding behind a building. They can laser the weapon. It will shoot the round, and the round will go 1 foot past the wall and explode and catch them from behind.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. You know, they do have some pretty weird things out there. And I'll be honest, as a technology freak, I'm opposed to war, but sometimes they come up with some pretty cool toys. And other times they come up with some real losers like that F-35. Anyway, Tom, we're going to let you go. We're coming up to the top of the hour and the lovely Lady Claire, and I need to get some more news out here. We were talking about computers, and apparently hackers have used one of the leaked NSA tools to spread a worm around. And the bad news is it's very hard to detect. That's also the good news. It doesn't cause any damage. It's not ransomware. It's not going to steal your banking information. What it does, they use the NSA's double pulsar exploit to install a cryptocurrency miner on your computer. The only thing you'll notice is that your machine seems to run a little tiny bit slower, and then it sends the cryptocurrency back to the hackers. We'll be back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And as you can see, the lovely Lady Claire joined us a little early on the show, and that was my fault. I wasn't paying enough attention to the clock, but maybe I just wanted her in here so I could, like, touch her. You know,
that was very sweet.
Especially out of view of the camera. Okay. So what we're going to do here, let's do a couple more of the regular news stories, and then we'll pass it on over to Claire's talking points. So we're talking about cybersecurity. And apparently the WannaCry ransomware is still out there and actually infected 55 speed and red light cameras down in Australia. And this stuff is out of control here. WikiLeaks Vault 7 released two new programs called Brutal Kangaroo and Emotional Simian. And these are cyber tools to infect air-gapped computers using a USB thumb drive, and bears striking similarity to Stuxnet and how it operated. There's a new Android banking malware posing as a software update, and this one, though, is not on the official Google Play Store. It's being fed out there through website advertisements. And you have to go to a third-party site to get it, and the advice is don't. Now, as you know, Windows 10s has just been released by Microsoft. It is partnered with its new Surface computer, and both are receiving absolutely disastrous reviews out there. And one of the things, hang on a second. Okay, what do you need to do there?
I just need for this to work.
Hang on. It does work.
Okay, thank
you. So Microsoft is out there. They're trying to pitch and sell this thing, and said that no known ransomware will run on Windows 10s. And so this group of security experts, apparently on the debut of the Surface laptop, they went out and got it. They installed all the patch updates and all the stuff that any good security-minded user would do. Then they turned it over to a hacking expert who took only 3 hours to figure out how to infect this machine with ransomware. one of us at a time. Okay, here we go. So that's out there. There's a flaw in Microsoft Patch Guard that will allow hackers to plant rootkits on Windows 10 boxes, 64-bit versions. It's amazing. We're in this mess because these companies are allowed to put out software that is less than perfect. They're indemnified against lawsuits from all the people who lose stuff. You probably remember I was having some computer difficulties yesterday. That was because I was trying to update the machine that I use to run Skype to RBN, and that includes a little miniature USB touchscreen that sits right here where I can see it, so I know I've got callers. And when I went to test it on 2 different Windows 7 machines, it hosed them. And it took me all day to get these machines running again, and on my desktop, the Arrow interface is now broken, and I can't figure out a way to fix it. And it's just a pain in the neck. All right, we're going to take a station break, then we'll be back with the lovely Lady Claire. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3, and this time it's official.
We really mean it.
Yes, we really mean it this time. The Lady Claire is here, as you can see on BAM User, and in response to numerous email demands, I've repositioned the camera so that Claire is more readily visible and easy to see, and I will just hide my face.
Oh, stop it.
Those
Don't
of you
go
who
there.
think she's much prettier than I am, which I think she's prettier than I am. What's first thing on your story list?
Well, I don't know about the rest of the people out there, but Mike, do you remember that archetypal dream about 2 freight trains coming at each other in slow motion, and you see what's going to happen, and you can't inform them until it's way too late?
Well, I've seen old silent movies where they did that as a stunt with surplus locomotives and everything. It was very popular entertainment. But it's an archetypal dream. You can see what's coming on, and you know it's going to be bad, and you can't do a thing to stop it.
Yeah, that's sort of where I am, and I'm officially annoyed and terrified at both U.S. foreign and domestic policy. And I'd like to start off with something that some of you who travel need to know. Some U.S. airlines are testing mandatory facial recognition scans on Americans flying abroad. This isn't about foreign people coming in or leaving. This is about you and me, folks. Just when you thought air travel couldn't get any more invasive, authoritarian, and downright miserable, the Department of Homeland Security and 2 U.S. carriers are determined to prove you wrong. Yesterday, Harrison Rudolph, a law fellow at the Center on Privacy and Technology at Georgetown Law, wrote a troubling article for Slate titled DHS is starting to scan Americans' faces before they get on international flights. And this is what they learned. Decades ago, Congress mandated that federal authorities keep track of foreign, let me repeat that word one more time, foreign nationals, as they enter and leave the United States. If the United States could record when every visitor stepped on or off U.S. soil, so the thinking went, it could easily see whether a foreign national had overstayed a visa. But in June of last year, without any congressional authorization and without consulting the public, the Department of Homeland Security started scanning the faces of Americans leaving the country, too. And let me tell you, when I was a kid, my late dad was an aircraft instrument mechanic, very conscientious. And I thought, because I thought everyone else who worked on aircraft the way he did as a mechanic was just that diligent. I used to love to fly. Now I feel like I'm being treated like livestock, poked, prodded, groped, and screamed at by the near moronic maniacs at the TSA. That's made me absolutely hate flying.
Okay, before we take our next story, I mean, we all know what this is really all about. It's bigger budget for Department of Homeland Security, pork barrel money for favored contractors. But what is the justification for scanning the faces of Americans who are leaving the country?
It's to create a national biometric database. That's where that's all going.
Well, they've never been able to really make the biometrics work. In fact, to my knowledge, there's only ever actually been one success story of actually getting a genuine arrest off a biometric database versus literally thousands and thousands of false positives.
Mm-hmm.
And again, somebody is concerned about having their face scanned. They can change their facial hair, and they can do whatever. I mean, somebody who's lost a lot of weight like me, my face looks very, very different than it did in when we did that 10th anniversary of 9/11 in New York.
Yeah.
I look like a completely different person.
Yeah. So, you know, I hate to fly anymore. It's really unfortunate.
I used to love to fly, and same thing with TSA. And ever since TSA has come along, tourism here in Hawaii has just been hammered. And our local tourism board likes to brag that our hotels have an 80% occupancy rate. And what they don't talk about are all the hotels that have gone out of business, been closed down, boarded up, especially on the leeward side. You go on up there, you will see these giant resorts boarded up. The golf courses have gone back to nature, and they don't even know what they can do with all that real estate. There's nobody willing to go on out and spend money there because people are going to other countries right now for vacations.
Yeah. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the potential passing of the Pelosi era.
Well, there's a positive note to end the show on.
Yes. Well, you know, it looks that with these 2 Republican wins in the Carolinas and also in Georgia, Democrats are looking to their leadership and saying, okay, what did we not get? You know, and unfortunately, the focus on the anti-Trump situation
backfired.
Which has backfired in their faces big time. And someone, you know, Kamala Harris, who is now in the Senate, she'd better slow down and take a look at what's going on and see about rearranging the deck chairs here, because it looks like Pelosi just can't cut it anymore. And the way that she's been speaking recently has been very confused, slurred, and not focused and to the point. I think she's,
words. I think there's mental deterioration there. And we're going to do a quick shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network.
Okay. I hope that the Democratic leadership maybe takes responsibility for its failures and learns from them. I'm not sure it's going to, but I would love for that to happen.
No, it's already started. We covered
really?
We covered that a little bit earlier. There's a group of Democrats at a closed-door meeting. They think it's time for Nancy Pelosi to stop being the House Minority Leader and just sort of fade into the corners because she's making the entire party look bad. And again, the Democratic Party is badly split between the hardcore Hillary supporters who think that politics are all about identity politics and playing the woman card and the gay card and the rest of it, versus the true progressives who are still tending to center around Bernie Sanders. But Pelosi is still trying to keep the Democratic Party in that same mold that has led to all these electoral disasters. And they do want her out.
Yeah. And she doesn't see it. She doesn't see it at all.
Nope.
I'd like to spend a little bit of time regarding Saudi Arabia. As most people know, there was a soft coup, if you will, with a change in the prince who will now be governing the country. And the new crown prince is known to be a little bit unpredictable. And he also was the author of an IPO, which is a signature initiative of his. He hopes to sell off 5% of Aramco, which is the Arabian oil company, which he argues could raise around $100 billion. I don't know if it's quite that much. But in order to finance what he calls his Vision 2030, which calls for a diversification in the Saudi economy.
Well, actually, that's a very smart thing for him to do.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia has been dealing with the reality for quite some time that the oil is going to run out at some point.
Yeah.
And they have been trying to diversify. One of the reasons they're building these beautiful cities, they're building them as banking centers. And as the oil money runs on out, they want to switch over to more of an American model of a country that doesn't actually produce anything but makes money off of other people's money.
Services.
Banking services in essence. And so diversification of any economy is always going to be a really good idea. If you're a single crop nation, the loss of that crop can be the loss of the nation itself.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, one thing that many oil analysts have been saying about this guy is that his ascent to power means that it's not a question of if but when Saudi Arabia and Iran are going to be at war inevitably. But in light of the fact that President Trump has recently visited Riyadh and essentially put his hat in with the House of Saud, I think this is probably something that's going to happen.
And it will seriously disrupt the flow of oil from that part of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A couple more things about Saudi Arabia. I just felt it was kind of important to put this all together. From globalresearch.ca, which is a very sober Canadian blog, which I like to link to frequently. And there was an article there today, Saudi Arabia versus Qatar, Middle East controlled demolition plan. And it is saying that Prince bin Salman getting control over the Saudi kingdom's government is a sign that the Saudi hardliners, vis-a-vis the crisis they have created with Qatar, have won the prelude of the battle. Saudi Arabia's Minister of Defense bin Salman was the architect of this horrific war which still goes on after 2 years in Yemen, which was until the split between the two nations which included Qatar. And what happened to the beautiful relationship between the Saudi and Qatari rulers? Its apex was the sponsorship of jihadis, first to topple Gaddafi in Libya, and their ultimate collaborative proxy terrorism accomplishment was the creation of ISIS to wreck Iraq and to topple Bashar al-Assad in Syria.
That's not working too well.
Not working terribly well at all. Now, there is a context of timing, and I don't think the excrement is about to hit the fan more quickly than this. But Saudi Arabia has just given Qatar 10 days to accede to its demands as of today's date. These included closing down Al Jazeera, and I have really appreciated Al Jazeera America, and to cut ties with Iran. Counting forward from today, this gives Qatar until the end of Sunday, 2 July, to comply.
July 2nd.
Yes, July 2nd. My best bet, and Mike, I'd like your commentary on this, is that Saudi Arabia may well move against Qatar militarily on or about the 4th of July because Americans are going to be distracted with Independence Day holiday activities and won't be paying much attention.
It does make a lot of sense. Does make a lot of sense.
But the question I have to ask, and I'm very interested in your feedback on this, what standing orders do you think U.S. commanders over those 10,000 troops stationed in Qatar have been given if, in fact, this happens?
Well, Saudi Arabia is not going to attack the U.S. forces. We may very well see the U.S. forces join the Saudis attacking Qatar from within. Frankly, if I were the government of Qatar right now, I would be asking those U.S. forces to leave.
Yeah. And Turkey's already on the ground in Qatar and doing exercises, about 3,000. And they have a base there, as you have mentioned, and they have essentially told the Saudi Arabians to pound sand on this issue of leaving that base.
And if it's one thing the Saudis have a lot of, it's sand.
Yes. I really think that if the Saudi government and this prince decide and have greenlit this attack, probably for the first full week in July, all heck is going to break loose.
Yeah, we all know a global war is coming.
Yeah.
And a regional war in the Mideast may be that stepping stone.
Yeah.
We know from General Wesley Clark that whatever the grand design of the U.S. government was, it was all supposed to be over in 2008.
Yep.
And the fact that it is now 2017 tells you that it's not really going all that well.
No, it's not. And I had to, amazingly enough, commend CNN for something they did. And the article, which was posted at antiwar.com, is the images Saudi Arabia doesn't want you to see. And I do commend CNN for having the, shall we say, male attributes to run it. And I would like our listeners and our viewers to please remember the U.S. government is enabling the Saudi genocide of children in Yemen.
Well, actually, Saudi Arabia is working as the U.S. government's proxy in Yemen because the U.S. went into Yemen some years ago and had what was then termed a successful intervention where the democratically elected leader was kicked out and a U.S. puppet ruler was put in.
Right, al-Hadi.
Al-Hadi. And now the people of Yemen want their country back, and they're trying to kick the puppet out. And that's what Saudi Arabia is, their job is to slap down the Yemenite people and say, you will love your U.S. puppet ruler.
Yeah. And I attached images of Yemeni children killed and maimed from Saudi's bombings. And because with military aid the Saudis are blockading Yemeni ports, no food can get in. So children are dying from complications of malnutrition in the 21st century? Yeah. And because malnutrition causes the body to shut down and become more prone to a host of diseases, cholera is sweeping through Yemen as I speak to you right now.
Well, I wouldn't jump to conclusions that the cholera has arrived there naturally.
No, I wouldn't either, you know. Not that it has necessarily been weaponized as far as my research has shown, but it has been used in water in African battles over Rhodesia many years ago.
Yes.
Oh, and did I mention that the Saudis are using banned depleted uranium weapons in Yemen?
The gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, and the DU weapons are having precisely the same effect on Yemeni children as it had on the children in Fallujah and our service members who did come home, had families, and the families were terribly deformed and destroyed. Stillbirths, cancers, and massive deformities are now the new normal for Yemeni babies. Now, I frankly can't think of much more horrific form of child abuse than poisoning a child in the womb through exposure to depleted uranium weapons. And you know, Mike, as I was putting together this little section on Saudi Arabia, I had to think that when you assassinate children, you assassinate the future of the country those kids come from. And this is precisely what the Saudi military, enabled by the U.S. military, is doing in Yemen. And please remember, this is being done with your tax dollars and in your name.
Well, no, it's being done in Saudi Arabia's name, but we know who Saudi Arabia is really working for.
We know, we know. Going over to the economy, McDonald's is replacing 2,500 human cashiers with digital kiosks. And apparently McDonald's stock is just on the ascendant. It's up 26% year to date, oblivious to the carnage among the broader restaurant and fast food sector, which is struggling. There is a reason for Wall Street's euphoria, the same one discussed in January in Dear Bernie, Meet the Big Mac ATM that will replace all of your 15-hour fast food workers. And they lay out the math in this, and fast food workers are going to become completely obsolete. And this is a game changer for the economics of the fast food industry. But what about the people, Mike, the kiosks are replacing?
They're going to join the ranks of the unemployed. I mean, the more, you know, we're seeing here a repeat of the offshoring debacle.
Yeah.
Where the first companies that offshored to lower their manufacturing costs got these incredible profits. And then everybody said, oh, we're all going to do this. And they all offshored, and all of a sudden, business fell off.
Yeah.
Because your employees collectively are your customers collectively.
Yeah.
And if they've all lost their jobs because their jobs have gone overseas, they don't have the money to go into the restaurants, to go into the car dealerships, to go into the shopping malls. And we're seeing it now. There have been like 5,000 store closings in the retail sector this year alone. There's a $3.8 trillion bubble in commercial real estate loans that is getting ready to explode because of all these stores that are closing and going out of business.
Retail-mageddon.
Retail-mageddon.
Yeah.
And having learned nothing at all from that, we're now seeing a repeat where the first companies to go in with this automation, and we're going to replace, we're going to have automated checkout instead of live cashiers. We're going to have more ATMs and less human tellers, and we're going to have digital kiosks instead of the people at the counter. And in one case, there is an entire restaurant that is all robotic, including the food preparation in the kitchen. And they're going to make a bunch of money. And then everybody's going to say, oh, we're going to automate and we're going to have a repeat of that disaster where nobody is actually going to have any money to spend.
Yep.
And so we're turning into a country that are going to have factories, restaurants, shopping mall stores staffed with robots standing around with nothing to do because there are no human customers coming on in to spend money.
Because they have none.
They have none.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it seems like something that is going to be a game changer, and I think it will for a while, but I think we're going to be looking at another bubble when all of these people who are unemployed can't find work.
It's going to look good for 6 months, maybe a year, and then after that, the back end is going to kick in, and it will be a repeat of the debacle of offshoring. I mean, we have over 100 million people in this country willing and able to work who have not been able to find jobs for years. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And Lady Claire, what is your next story?
The next story I read with a little bit of irony. The Senate has announced a probe of Loretta Lynch behavior in the 2016 election.
Yeah, see, that whole thing about obstruction of justice they were trying to hit against Trump, it's now backfired and backflashed.
Yeah. In a letter to Ms. Lynch, the committee asked her to detail the depths of her involvement in the FBI's investigation, including whether she ever assured Clinton confidants that the probe wouldn't push too deeply into the matter. Fired FBI Director James Comey has said publicly that Ms. Lynch tried to shape the way he talked about the investigation into Mrs. Clinton's emails, and he also hinted at other behavior, which I can't talk about yet, he said, that made him worried about Ms. Lynch's ability to make impartial decisions. Now, Mike.
Imagine my shock.
Yeah, and surprise. Now, here's the deal. She is not going to explain anything to them. Even if she is subpoenaed, she may well not respond. And if I were Charles Grassley, who's heading up this committee right now, I would be preventing her from leaving the country to go to another country that doesn't have an extradition treaty with the U.S.
That would certainly send a message to the public that, yes, there had been some skullduggery going on, and there would be a hue and cry saying, let's go back on in and investigate that email scandal again.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's very ironic, and I wonder where she's going to wind up. Because she's not going to want to testify. She isn't going to want to go up against the Clintonistas.
She's not going to go up against the Clintonistas. She's going to go on in there, take the oath to tell the truth, and then she's going to try and lie her face off. And what the committee are going to have to do is actually catch her in a lie and then use it as a hammer to say, you can come clean or, we're going to hit you with perjury.
Well, I'll tell you what. I've got 2 cents, and all of our readers and listeners, I'm just betting my husband a whole 2 cents she does not respond to the subpoena.
All right.
Okay? Deal?
Deal.
Okay. Let's go over to South Korea
Let's
now.
Not.
This is just metaphorically speaking, Mike.
Okay.
That way.
I'm not a big fan of kimchi.
South Korea does not
Did I tell you I'm writing a book on Korean cooking? It's called How to
Walk Your Dog. Yes,
Thank you for stepping all over the punchline.
I love you, dear.
All right.
South Korea does not need U.S. permission to engage in policy dialogue with North Korea, ROK Presidential Office has stated. South Korea or its head of state, Moon Jae-in, does not need permission from the United States President or anyone else to engage North Korea in dialogue, Seoul's presidential office, Chung Hwa-dae, said on Wednesday. Resumption of dialogue with North Korea may need to be pursued in close cooperation and consultation with the U.S., but South Korea does not need to be allowed by the U.S. to do so.
Well, I mean, there are 2 aspects here. First of all, he's actually correct.
Yeah.
The United States government has no authority regarding what any other 2 nations decide they want to talk about. And this gets into that issue of face. Which is so important in the Asian cultures.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But it's obvious that Moon Jae-in is moving forward with his declared agenda of calming things down between North and South Korea with the ultimate goal of eventual reunification.
Yeah, he's a sunshine policy advocate, right? Okay. All right. Well, it looks like he is developing some male attributes when dealing with President Trump in the U.S. and the issue of rapprochement with North Korea.
Well, I notice they're still not allowing the deployment of any more of those THAAD missiles.
And they only thought they were going to get one, right?
Actually, they thought they were going to get one, but that was before President Moon Jae-in was elected.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden there are 2 deployed and like another half dozen ready to go, and he put his foot down.
Good for him.
Yes.
Good for him. He's developing a presence, and I wish him well, and I hope for the best in that situation.
Well, you know, I mean, considering the spectacular flop of the test they had out here at Kauai
this
week,
yeah.
you know, it's leave the THAAD in its crate. It's not going to work anyway.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, we got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And what do you have next on your list?
Well, I have an article by Stephen Lendman, who is a gentleman to whose work I link pretty consistently. He is a very fine, astute political observer. And what he's talking about in this article is that the U.S. is recklessly provoking Russia. And the second part of that title is the unthinkable could happen either by accident or design.
That's where they're obviously aimed.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And it's painfully clear to me at this juncture that the American deep state is provoking Russia in every possible way as a prelude to a war against it.
Well, what's going on here is they're provoking Russia. They're trying to get Russia to make the first overt move so that they can be demonized as the aggressors and the bad guy.
Yeah, right.
Franklin Roosevelt did exactly the same thing.
With Japan.
Everybody knew war with Japan was coming, and Roosevelt gave explicit orders to the Hawaii commanders. It is imperative that Japan be seen to make the first overt move.
Yeah.
And which is the main reason that Roosevelt didn't tell General Short or Admiral Kimmel that the fleet was on the way, the Japanese fleet. Okay.
I am very thoroughly appalled and disgusted at how intently President Trump has embraced war over true diplomacy in so many of the situations I am seeing developing, which will probably flare out of control.
And that is my biggest disappointment with Trump.
Yeah.
Because along with immigration and lock her up, Trump campaigned on a promise of pulling back from all these foreign interventions, and that promise has clearly gone out the window, whether he's compromised by the deep state or he's been convinced that abandoning the war agenda will mean the immediate collapse of the U.S. economy and government. I don't know, but we're still heading into a world war. And it's probably going to go nuclear, and we're going to see billions are going to die this time.
Yeah, and in looking at the interweaving and intertanglement of all these issues, it's not a question to me of if, it's a question of when. And the only thing I think we can do right now, other than try to witness what is going on, as you and I do, is to counsel our readers and listeners to, if you haven't started, start prepping now. A very good place to start is the subscription to Daisy Luther's The Organic Prepper newsletter. Now, you're going to get some ads with that for goods and services that she has vetted, but I have found her information brilliantly and brutally astute when it comes to the difference between actually surviving or not surviving.
Well, you know the old joke, how do you tell a prepper? They're the ones not eating out of the trash dumpsters after a disaster.
Right.
And by the way, prepping is actually a lot more than just buying a bunch of emergency supplies and putting them in a closet.
Right.
It really is a lifestyle because you have to train to use the stuff, you have to work with it, you have to keep an eye on it. And unfortunately, a lot of very unethical companies have jumped on the prepper bandwagon, if you will.
Yeah.
And they're selling some very cheaply made equipment and supplies, very poorly made, on the theory that in all probability they're never actually going to be used. And the issue is that if you go to actually use them and they're not working, you're going to be in real trouble. So you have to really keep an eye out on who your suppliers. I remember one time when we were first starting to build up our hurricane kit. And we got this generator crank radio flashlight that was actually approved by the Red Cross of America. We figured, okay, they've obviously decided this is a cool product, and so we bought it. And something like 6 months later, the plastic shell was literally turning into goo.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had this packed away in our hurricane kit. So, again, the problem is it's almost like exercise machines. Most exercise machines at the low end aren't designed to be used for all that long. They figure people give up hope, they get tired, and they put it back under the bed, and they never pull it out again. And the same thing with unethical companies producing prepper supplies. They're actually made poorer quality than the stuff that you would buy and use on a daily basis. And in many cases, buying something that you would use around the home on a daily basis actually makes a lot more sense than buying something that is specifically say this is for the prepper outfit.
Absolutely. But if you haven't by now, please find the stores either online or in your area that you want to patronize, find out what they have, and do take care of yourselves out there. I'd like to hop over to an article that I read in Global Research, a Canadian outlet to which I link also very frequently. And the title of the article was U.S. Foreign Policy, Global Hegemony, Soft Power, and the Geopolitics of Eurasia. And it goes to a quote from Henry Kissinger, who was brilliant and vile all at the same time, who is brilliant and vile all at the same time. And he made the observation that a mortal danger for the U.S. is formation of any political military coalitions between the Euro-Asian great powers, primarily between Russia and China, as such coalitions would have a real capability to outstrip both the U.S. economy and military.
Well, they failed that policy. I mean, there was a concerted effort to try and turn Russia and China against each other, but they have moved very close together. And if a global war comes, if a world war comes, it is going to be the United States against Russia and China and probably a bunch of other countries as well.
Members of the BRIC organization and the SCO are changing the game, and quite concretely. The economic reforms in China and Russia, coupled with their moving to embrace Europe with trade in infrastructure like Xi Jinping's Silk Road project, where China pledged $124 billion, and that's with a B, for a new Silk Road as a champion of globalization, are leaving the unhinged, surveilled state of America in the dust. And this is why I believe we are hearing so much demonization of both countries, as though to prepare American citizens for war against them to stop the ascent of both the yuan and the ruble.
That's what this has been about all along, is returning the world to the days of Bretton Woods, when all countries had to go through the U.S. dollar to conduct cross-border trade and banking, off of which the Federal Reserve made a very handsome profit. And they miss their mafia-like piece of the action. They want to go back to those good old days where they didn't actually have to do anything. The money just poured on in.
I'd like to go over to Israel because someone decided to play kind of a cruel joke on the Palestinian people. Book on Palestinian history becomes instant bestseller on Amazon. The author's argument that Palestinians are not a people because they are void of history isn't new. It's a mainstay of the Israeli right. And there is a book called A History of the Palestinian People, From Ancient Times to the Modern Era, that went on sale on Amazon last week and was the most sold book in the site's Israel and Palestine History category and the 543rd most sold book on the site. The pages for the book, however, contained 132 blank pages, as though there was no Palestinian history
whatsoever. That was the whole message.
That was the message. The author of this piece explained the motivations by writing it to a religious radio station, Kol Hai. The Palestinian people believe they are a people, and someone needs to tell them the truth, even if it hurts. Look what happens when they were given the feeling that they are a real people. And I hate what this guy's done, but I must mention, Mike, that in a very Orwellian manner, Vole understands that to control the future, one must be able to control the past, which in his case means to completely erase Palestinian history in what is now contemporary Israel and beyond.
Well, let's see. I've got a few things here in my hand I'm looking at. And let's see. This is a 50 mil coin, and was minted in Palestine in very badly tarnished. I can't actually see the year, and I can't even get out of the plastic case.
Boy.
Let's see. I have here, this is minted in 1941 in Palestine, and it is a 2 mil coin. I have another 50 mil coin. This one's in better condition. Minted in Palestine in 1935. And let's see, and on and on and on. Listeners have been very kind to send me these coins here.
Yeah.
But it does hammer home the point. This idea that there never was a Palestine or a Palestinian people is absolutely absurd.
Yep.
And especially when you realize there really isn't such a thing as a Jewish people, because they're all genetically the descendants of other converts to the religion.
Like the Khazars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Ashkenazi Jews they don't have a unique genetic fingerprint. If you look at their DNA, you can see they originally came from the Khazars. The Sephardics actually descend from a blend of the Hebrew and the Berber. And so this idea that you're going to say that we are a people and you are not is just more Israeli arrogance. You will recognize our state, we refuse to recognize your state.
Yeah.
And it is absurd. And again, I see a strong parallel between the blank pages of that book and this campaign in our country to tear down the Confederate flag and all the Confederate monuments. And I'm getting ready for somebody to say, well, we don't need those old Confederate battlefields preserved. Let's turn them into golf courses or sell them to develop shopping malls and things like that.
Yeah. When you take away or you try to erase the history of a people, that's a really bad thing, because, again, when you take away the history, you take away their future.
Yes, you do.
You take away their cultural identity, and that is a really lousy thing to do.
Well, they're trying to do it to all of us. The New World Order globalist people are doing exactly that.
Yeah.
Trying to take away our identity. They're trying to get us confused about who we are, what restroom we're supposed to use, because you're easier to control that way.
Yeah.
People with a strong sense of an identity are much harder to control. And, Israel invests a tremendous amount in basically indoctrinating its people with that strong sense of identity, going all the way back to Moses. At the same time, they're out there saying, well, you don't have any real history, you Palestinians.
Yeah. And the other thing that the Israeli government likes to do is keep their people afraid.
Oh, yeah.
All the time.
Like our government isn't doing that?
Yep, our government is doing that pretty much all the time, too. It's a tactic. And you have to lift out of it enough to say, all right, am I really logically under this much threat? Am I really logically under this much threat?
Well, in the good old days before the Internet and the independent media, when people had no choice but to look at the TV sets and read the newspapers, they say, oh, yes, we're under threat, we're under danger. And take it from me, I'm old enough to remember the original Red Scare of the 1950s and the first Cold War, and every day we were being told the commies were going to invade, they were going to force socialized medicine on us, they were going to do terrible things to our farm animals and all the rest of it. It never, ever happened. And meanwhile, at the same time, in the former Soviet Union, their government was telling their people, the American imperialists are coming for you. They're going to come on in. They're going to take away the benefits of socialism and force you to buy new refrigerators and cars or whatever the threat. And their people believed it. Oh, we're a terrible threat. And it didn't happen. It never, ever happened.
And, Michael, would you share again the law under the Soviet government about making stuff to last?
One of the propaganda tools that the U.S. used to use against the Soviet Union was that when you saw photos and films of life in the Soviet Union, everybody appeared to be driving much older cars, inside their homes were much older appliances, and this was held up as proof of the poverty of the Russian people. But what was actually going on was Soviet law mandated high-quality products. so that when you bought a car, you had it for a very long time. If you bought a refrigerator, it would last a very long time. And so people would buy a refrigerator or a car or a stove or anything else. They didn't have a reason to buy a new one. And, you know, after 10, 20 years, it looks like it's an old antique. It's not because they're poor. It's because the appliances were built to last. And managers of factories who produced sub-quality products could find themselves over in the gulags. And it was actually one of the things they thought was going to help the lifestyle of their people, that they only have to buy certain things once, maybe twice in their life, and then they can go on and acquire other things, as opposed to the model under capitalism here in the U.S., where you are working yourself to death to buy the same things over and over and over again every few years.
Mike and I had a very interesting illustration of that recently. Our dishwasher went to dishwasher heaven, and we dutifully called Sears, had a very nice technician who came in, looked at it, and what he told us was that the part that was needed to replace it cost more than a low-cost dishwasher would.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, it's like, come on, guys.
And, you know, he showed us the inside. It's all corroded away. The gaskets are leaking. And he was frankly amazed it was still working. But again, in this country, manufactured goods are designed and manufactured to wear out very quickly. New computer every 5 years, new cell phone every 3 years. In a healthy economy, when people have lots of disposable income, that business model can work. We're not there anymore.
No. And the other thing I asked when I was making the appointment to have our dishwasher looked at and serviced if possible was, how long is the guarantee for whatever parts might be needed to replace? And the person in customer service at the other end of the phone said, oh, for a whole 90 days. Like, hello.
Yeah.
90 days?
90
You've got
days.
to be kidding me.
The other illustration, our clothes dryer. The little belt that drives the drum around failed. And the repairman who came on out to replace that revealed to us that the replacement belt for that dryer is only half the thickness of the original, because they want them to fail on a regular basis to encourage you to buy a new dryer, something we are obviously not in a position to do. So, again, that's the difference between the Soviet and the capitalistic system. And the U.S. took all these photos of Soviets with long-lasting products, and they said, see, this proves how poor they are. They're not able to buy a new car every 5 years or a new television or whatever. They didn't need to.
Yeah.
They didn't need to. So, anyway, there's that. We're coming up now on a commercial break, and we're going to have a couple of commercials, and we'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program on this Pauhana Friday. And, Claire, let's go with another story.
Okay. In Sweden, there has been a leaked police report that there are 23 Muslim-controlled no-go zones plagued with violent sexual assault and gun crimes. And even though European and their U.S. counterparts have denied their existence, this leaked report from the Swedish police confirms that there are at least 23 Muslim-controlled no-go zones and some 60 vulnerable areas where non-Muslim citizens of the country can no longer visit. The areas are plagued with violent sexual assaults, gun crimes, and things have gotten so bad, Michael, that even police and emergency services personnel refuse to go there.
That is serious.
Yeah. And this is the direct result of unvetted immigration and why we have to stop it in its tracks here in the United States.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This idea that everybody has a right to just go wherever they want is absurd. And I can show how absurd it is with a simple analogy. Do I have a right to walk into our neighbor's house at any time, into the bathroom where the lady of the house is showering? Obviously no. And it may seem like an absurd analogy, but yeah, in point of fact, the same thing applies to a nation. If somebody wants to come into the nation with malevolent intent, why should we allow them in?
Yeah.
It's just common sense.
Yeah.
And this whole globalist New World Order idea, this open border idea, is just absolutely absurd.
It is. And, of course, people like George Soros don't have to deal with the aftermath. They're in their
No, they don't care.
bunkers.
He's just dreaming of the one world government that he will bring about, and there will be statues raised to his memory, and pigeons of the world will rejoice.
Yeah. But, I mean, this is terrible. Sweden used to be one of the safest European countries to go to or vacation in. Not anymore.
Oh, well, thank goodness they've got that liberal feminist government up there doing all this stuff. Remember when Grand Tour was there?
Yeah.
Jeremy Clarkson was just...
Oh, he nailed them.
He was just poking fun at them for the ridiculous things they were doing.
Yeah.
And Sweden has just allowed more refugees than pretty much any other EU country to come on in. All right, we got about a minute left here, so is there anything else you want to say to our listeners?
Yeah, I want to ask you to please be very kind to yourselves, to be very kind to the people you work with, your friends, your family. We are all dealing with a lot of pressure in our lives, and I know, what Mike and I are dealing with on a daily basis.
You wouldn't believe.
Yeah, but just please try to be kind, try to be loving, be gentle with yourself and the people around you, because one of the things we've seen driving on this rock has just become insane.
There's a lot of road rage out there. When we first came here, everybody was polite, everybody drove slow, and now it is just as crazy as any big city on the mainland, and the roads are lined with idiot flowers, which are flowers put where some idiot killed themselves and possibly some bystanders.
Yeah.
There's the music. Time for us to get on out of here and try and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back on Monday here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Please make a point of taking what you learn here, sharing it with everyone that you know. Please make a point of trying to catch History Channel's America's War on Drugs. It's time for the American people to face up to the reality of the government we have in Washington, D.C.
Amen.
We'll be back on Monday. Aloha, America.